Okay, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming along this evening to find out about the Arfordir Penfro LiDAR portal and the project. I'm really pleased to be here this evening to tell you a little bit more about how the portal came to be, what it involves and how you could get involved this evening. So I'm here with Thomas from Pembrokeshire Coast National Park. He's also going to be co-presenting with me and saying a bit more about the project. So without further ado, let's get started. So what we're going to do today, we're going to go through the project team introductions, so who's who and sort of get you familiar with that. We're going to talk a little bit about the project. Thomas is going to take the lead for that one. I'm going to run you through what LiDAR data is, kind of how it works, just a really brief introduction. And then we'll talk a little bit about citizen science and how the portal that we've created for the Arfordir Penfro area will help us to engage local communities in identifying and looking after their heritage in the area. We'll talk about how the project works, what the next steps is, and then of course open forum for any questions that you might have later on. Was that a wave, Phil?
No, just put my microphone down.
Okay. I thought you were trying to get my attention. I do apologise. So, but who are we? Well, I'm Rebecca Bennett. I'm a consultant who's working with the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park, I think for the last 3 years or so now. We've done various different aspects of project work around LiDAR, including an acquisition of bespoke LiDAR, which Thomas will speak a little bit more to in a minute. But I'm very privileged to have been able to go out and do some field work and some training in the field with volunteer teams a couple of years ago. And essentially my specialism is in LiDAR and remote sensing. So that's what I did my PhD in. Sat in my ivory tower, I realised that there was an awful lot of information about LiDAR that wasn't really trickling down. So when I completed my PhD, I set up PCS Consultancy to specialise in training people, both professionals and members of the public, in how to make the most out of LiDAR data. I'm going to throw to Thomas, who will introduce himself and the project.
Thanks, Rebecca. For those of you who don't know me, so I'm a community archaeologist for Pembrokeshire Coast National Park, and I've sort of managed the project on behalf of the National Park. I think it's actually closer to 4 years, Rebecca, since we started on this project. I think it was 2021.
Pandemic timescales, Thomas. I've lost all thread of time during that time.
I know it does feel like just time has just gone really, really quickly. So yeah, and do we have the map, Rebecca, just so people can see the area that we've focused on? So just to give you a bit of background, so we got some funding via a project called Downshire Dipping. So it's Dancing on the Cliff is the translation, and it was across West Wales. So it included Gwynedd, I think Anglesey, Llŷn Peninsula, Pembrokeshire, Ceredigion, so all the kind of areas. And it was part of a sustainable management scheme, which was funded by the European Union and the Welsh Government. So we had enough funding to cover an area of 345 square kilometres, which hopefully you can see in that map. It's all the red blocks going around the landscape. So it includes the national park designation is the yellow boundaries. So the whole of the northern bit of the national park. Thanks, Rebecca, for that animation. And then we've got Strumbold Head also in there, and then in between we've got a bit of the bits that are not included in the national park area. So the reason that we wanted to capture the LiDAR, and I won't kind of talk too much about that because Rebecca will kind of go through that for those of you who are not so familiar. It's basically we wanted that data to try and enhance and improve our understanding of archaeology in this landscape, and that would then help us with better management. And obviously we could pass that information on to others like Heneb, who are also trying to manage this landscape. So we awarded the contract to Hansa Luftbild, and they're German based. And then what they were going to do was on an aircraft, they would capture the LiDAR via a sensor. So the original timescale was they were due to get the data by the end of March 2022, but due to various factors, Brexit, pandemic, logistics, project management, that was delayed until March 23. So originally the plan was for the project to come to an end in June 23. We were fortunate that we were able to slightly extend it. But as part of that, we were due to do some community engagement. So essentially train people in the LiDAR and then doing a bit of field work. So we used NRW's 1 meter LiDAR. We were fortunate enough that they were doing an all Wales one. So slightly not as high a resolution as the one we got, but it was a good opportunity for us to do some training. So we did that in October 2022, and then we got some feedback. And I think there's a few who have joined us who actually attended that, which hopefully they found they enjoyed it. So they will have obviously met you before, Rebecca, as well. So yeah, so we did that. That gave us some feedback. And then finally in March 23, we got the data. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get the aerial photos that we did want with the LiDAR, but in some way the photos were so high in terms of the size of the files, it would have been quite challenging to manage those anyway. So and we have found other aerial photos that we can use to help us with this. And then once we'd received the data from Hamza, Rebecca then kindly just did a QA of it, so she checked the quality was at the right standard. And then once that was approved, once they've got the final versions, she then produced some visualizations, which, as you will see in the portal, will help with interpreting stuff in the data. And then sort of in 2024, we got the Dyfed Archaeological Trust, obviously now known as HENEB. They helped create some resources to go with the portal, so to help people when they're being trained in what sort of archaeology they might find and how it might look in the LiDAR. So they produced that, and then finally we commissioned the development of the portal to Rebecca and her team at the end of 2024. We chose Rebecca because she was already doing something similar with Eryri, so it made sense. We're trying to create a uniform kind of platform system in Wales, and also she's obviously got lots of experience working on the similar projects as well. And then between January and now, we've been frantically busy, or I should say Rebecca and her team have been busy. I've just done a little bit of chipping in. And then here we are. We're here hopefully to launch this portal. And I just want to say thank you to the volunteers who helped test the system last month. So thanks for their time and also their feedback. That's really helped with this as well. So hopefully that kind of covers an overview, Rebecca, but do let me know if you want me to provide any further information.
I think it's really nice, and it's nice to remember kind of the scene that's been set by this project, that it's been a long time in coming, and we're really excited to be able to present the data to you in a format that is easy for you to use, because as anybody who's sort of tried to look at LiDAR data from NRW, or maybe you've had a look at some of the Environment Agency LiDAR data from over the border, you'll know that making something available doesn't necessarily make it accessible. So the whole point of this portal is to try and provide you with the LiDAR in a way that is accessible, and all the training and the information that you need around it to really read the landscape through the LiDAR and to understand the archaeology and the cultural heritage of the landscape using LiDAR as one of your resources. So a little bit more about kind of how this works in terms of the other areas. So I'm currently directly managing two other portals, one for the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape and one that is a linear project looking at the Ridgeway, which runs through Oxfordshire and West Berkshire. And both of these have a similar premise to what we're rolling out here in Wales, in the idea being making the LiDAR available so that people can easily map features that they see. These will contribute back to the historic environment record, so the HENEB record that's managed in Wales, enabling you to access that data both for research purposes, but also to feed into the planning system and into agri-environment schemes and the whole wealth of other information or other products that can be created from having good quality historic environment data available to you. So why is citizen science kind of important? Why is it really sort of useful for everybody? Well, the obvious answer is that we simply don't have enough resource to be able to look at these data sets with the handful of professionals that are trained and available to do this work. But that's only a very small part of it, because each of these projects that I've been involved with, having people who are local to the area, who understand the landscape, who are embedded within the area that we're looking at, brings so much more to the project and so much more understanding of what's happening and the current environment as well as the historic environment. So the knowledge and experience of the people in the room in the volunteer team is really critical to getting really good results and really good contributions to the project and therefore to the historic environment record. And also it's just a really nice way of helping people to see the landscape from a completely different perspective. As you'll see, and I know that a few of you in the room have worked a little bit with LiDAR before, but as you'll see as we go through some examples today, and if you stay on and do the training and become part of the volunteer team, you really do see things in the LiDAR that you can't visualize in any other data set. So it's really quite a unique way of looking at the landscape, and one that I think more people should have access to. So there's lots of benefits all round, and hopefully if the experience of the other projects is anything to go by, you will find it an engaging and fun and valuable volunteer experience from that perspective. And we really value your time and your expertise in contributing to these sort of projects too. So we start you off by, this is an example of the historic environment record, so the things that already exist within the landscape. We're not setting you out to float entirely on your own. We're providing you with the resources and the data sets, not just the LiDAR, but as I'll talk about in a minute, lots of other information, lots of other data layers that you can start to compare what is known already to what might be new within the LiDAR data. So what is LiDAR data? Forgive me if you're all really au fait with this, but I do like to start by running through what the data is and how it works, just because it gives everybody the same baseline to work from. So LiDAR data, LiDAR is a portmanteau of light detection and ranging, and it's essentially an active survey method. So what we're doing is we're measuring how long it takes a laser beam to travel from a sensor that is mounted under a plane to the ground and back again. So if we know how long it takes that laser beam to travel between A and B, and we know the speed that laser is traveling at, which is of course the speed of light, we can then work out the distance between A and B. And what that gives us is a high resolution digital model of the landscape. We can put all those millions and millions of points together into a model to create that really good representation of the landscape as it is today. So that modern landscape. So the aerial data that we captured, the aerial LiDAR data that was captured in 2023 by this project, is at 16 or 20 pulses per meter. So that's 16 to 20 little height points that are then joined together to create this model. And what that gives us is a 25 centimeter resolution data set. Now, if you come on to do the training with us, you'll see the difference between the different sorts of resolution. But the data captured for the national coverage by Natural Resources Wales is a 1 meter resolution data set. So what we're looking at here for this particular project is something that is basically sort of 8 times the quality of that, because of course the resolution is in 2 dimensions. So you're looking at being able to see much smaller features and the features that you can see in much finer detail. Why does that matter? Well, it helps you to do good interpretations of the data. It helps you to distinguish between features that might be more modern in origin and features that might be more historic. And it reduces some of that uncertainty around what a feature might be in the model if you've got a better resolution of data to compare to your other resources. So these models are really important for understanding the historic landscape, because in the past, the way that people have used the landscape, be that for farming or industry, for travelling through, for extraction of materials, be that quarrying or say peat extraction, many of those activities leave a physical trace on the surface of the landscape. So sort of lumps and bumps, pits, ditches, cuts, platforms, which we can trace by looking at the microtopography. So there's very small changes in the surface of the landscape. And LiDAR is the perfect technique for looking at microtopography, which is why it's made such a big splash and such a big impact for our understanding of the archaeology of these landscapes. So by looking at LiDAR as this particular tool, we are getting really the best view of the landscape from that perspective. Now, of course, not all historic or archaeological activities leave a trace on the landscape. So we have to remember that there are still going to be gaps in our knowledge, but the sort of detail that you can get from a LiDAR model really is quite a quite brilliant baseline from which to start doing other sorts of targeted research, be that walkover survey, geophysical survey, looking at the other techniques, bringing us down to excavation, the whole plethora of stuff that you can do to understand the historic landscape. Having that coherent transcription of the LiDAR data really is an excellent baseline for that. So moving on from that, so what exactly is the Arfordir Penfro portal? I'm going to show you around the portal in a minute. So it's hosted within lidar.cymru. So as Thomas mentioned, we have aspirations within Wales to provide a sort of a space that lots of different projects, such as the one here in Pembrokeshire, but also the Uri area where we've got a data capture for the Carnoddau that's currently being worked up into a portal. We wanted that to have a place to live where all these different portals could be. So the lidar.cymru is the sort of overarching place where each of these projects will sit. It's bringing together the resources that help you to read the landscape and to record archaeological features. So the resources that we have available to you within this interactive map include the modern and historic ordnance survey data, the satellite imagery provided through the Bing mapping service, and modern maps. So you can see road names and road numbers and orientate yourself into the modern landscape as well. We've provided you with 3 different LiDAR visualizations. So we have a surface model, a terrain model, and a local relief model. So very briefly, the surface model includes all features. So that's buildings, bridges, vegetation. The terrain model is the LiDAR data with those upstanding features removed. So as you'll probably be aware, the really unique selling point of LiDAR is that unlike aerial photography, you can manipulate the models that you create from those laser points to remove vegetation and buildings, which means that for the first time you can see through the trees and see the landscape underneath vegetated or forested areas. And then the local relief model, the third of these, is a specialist visualization that really enhances the microtopography. So remembering that that's the very small lumps and bumps that typically represent past human interaction with the land surface. So what we've got here are 3 really great visualizations that put together give you a very good overview of the way that the landscape is formed, both in the grand changes and in the microtopography and the small scale changes. And then we also have, as I mentioned before, a series of data layers. So this is the known knowns, the things that are already within the various different historic environment records. So we have the HER records themselves, which are represented as point data. We have features from the Royal Commission Aerial Mapping Programme for parts of the project area, and these are represented as polylines. And then we also have scheduled monument extents, which are represented as polygons. And we have example feature transcriptions, which were done for us by a professional archaeologist, helping us to tie in the sorts of features that we're seeing with the LiDAR with the descriptions that we're familiar with from the HER and from our existing knowledge of archaeological features. So all of this large data set is brought together within a single interactive map that's available for you to browse and to identify new features. Before I go and sort of give you a little live demo of the map itself, I also want to highlight the training materials. So in order to be able to access the map, as you've become a volunteer, we'll ask you to go through the training materials. We've got a bilingual online course which has 7 modules, and it'll take roughly 6 hours to complete. So it's kind of the equivalent of coming along for a day, the sort of courses that some of you have been along before in terms of time. But of course, because it's an online course and because it's broken down into bite-sized bits, that gives you the flexibility to do it as and when you can, and to sort of maybe fit it around everybody's busy lives perhaps a little bit better. And what we have found in terms of the volunteer community on these projects is that because we can have a bit more flexibility in terms of when the training is delivered, how the training is delivered, and how the actual volunteering task is done, we're able to include lots of different people who perhaps wouldn't be able to join in with a typical sort of boots on the ground archaeological volunteering project. And that might be, you know, there's all sorts of barriers, aren't there? There's physical barriers, people who can't be out and about for reasons of physical limitation or simply geography, but then also people who've got caring responsibilities who might not be able to have a whole day coming in and training. They can fit in an hour of volunteering after the kids have gone to bed, for example, in the evening. And so what we found, it's quite a nice way of expanding the opportunities for people to get involved with the historic environment and with volunteering in their area. So back to the course. In this course, you will have all the tools that you need to be able to understand the landscape, to be able to interpret the LiDAR data and discover new features. And in doing so, you're going to add to that depth of our collective understanding of the past. There are also detailed instructions for how to use that portal, how to use the different data sets, and how to use the mapping tools to draw features and create an attribute data set that relates to those features. So essentially to do that record of potential archaeological features. As I mentioned, you work through the materials independently at your own pace. They remain available to you for the whole time that you're volunteering. You can come back to them at any time and reference them and sort of remind yourself about what's there. However, you do have to complete the training course in order to be able to gain access to the portal. So that's the steps and stages of being part of this project. So shall we go and have a quick look at the portal and the training materials? I'm going to do that thing where we switch windows, which is always a little bit of a fuss and a faff. So bear with me for half a second. So when you come to the LiDAR portal, the first thing that you'll need to do is register for an account. And as soon as this goes live this week, you'll get an email asking you to join, to register for an account on there. And once you've done that, you can log in and you'll have access to the training materials. So here within the main LiDAR portal, you can see that underneath the About LiDAR, there are two versions of exactly the same course, one in English and one in Welsh. So if I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you can see a little bit more of the screen at the same time. So here is our training course, and you can see this one, I've completed all the modules. I can track my progress at the top of the course. And down here, hopefully you can see that we have a series of modules, and within each of these modules, there are a series of topics. So you work through the course, going through the different topics. So we have an introduction to how to use the course. What is LiDAR? How does it work? How do we see through the trees using these data? And then a bit of a deep dive into the visualizations, what they mean. And the reason for this is that I genuinely feel that if you understand what it is you're looking at, you've got a much better chance. If you understand the sort of data visualization and the LiDAR data itself, you've got a much better chance of being able to interpret the landscape and make sense of it. This task of understanding the landscape is quite complex, actually, in many ways. So we try to provide you with also the information about how to use resources such as LiDAR to understand the historical landscape. So thinking about how we describe the form of a feature, understanding how resolution of the data impacts what we can and can't see, whether we can date features from within the LiDAR data. So looking at different periods, could a feature be medieval, post-medieval, prehistoric? How would we know? Based on that, and thinking about our other resources. So how do historic maps contribute to our understanding and our interpretation? And then here we go on to essentially what is a feature gazetteer. So for each of the different types of features that you're likely to encounter, and this is based on the work by Heneb. So this is specific to both this geography, this area, this landscape, and also the sorts of features that would have a physical presence within a landscape. So we've got all the different categories. You can go and have a look and read about each of them and see examples. So let's open the field systems topic here just as a quick example. It's always a little bit slow when Zoom is going, so apologies for that. So you see here we have the topic. We have a definition of what a field system is, a little bit more information about it, and then several examples and subcategories, the different types of field system. And you see here there's lots of illustrations to help you to get your eye in to look at these features. In the next part of the portal, so here we have the information about how to actually map the features themselves, how to use the portal. We've broken this down into different stages. So for example, the recording features, you'll see that you've got step-by-step instructions as part of the module, but you also have a series of videos that are available to you to watch, and you can come back to these at any time to be able to refresh your memory as to how each of these work. And then when you've completed the training and you get to the finish and the end, you're also able to download those instructions for how to use the portal as a PDF. So you can print that and have it on your desk or beside you as you're doing the work as well, to save you switching backwards and forwards between sessions. So we've got the portal instructions that are available for print, and the feature gazetteer, which is also available for printing. And some additional resources. So if you get to the end of the course and decide that you are absolutely a LiDAR nerd and there's definitely more reading that you want to do, you've got all the basics available to you as part of this course, but there are also some additional resources highlighted here that if you wanted to take it further and do some more reading, you'd be really welcome to. So when you've completed the course, and it's really important to note that each of these sessions, if I pop back to the field system, so each of these sessions, each of these topics has a button at the bottom of it to mark it as completed. And that's what allows this progress bar to go along the top. So I'm going to switch to, I think, if I go to the Welsh course, the Welsh version of the course. And just to point out, you can switch between Welsh and English a version of any page at any time by using the toggle here. So you see I can switch back using this red toggle to the English version of the course. So here is an example of a course that is not completed, that is partially done. So can you see here at the top we've got a progress bar showing 5%, and then down here you can see that 2 of my topics have been ticked off, checked as done, but the topics below haven't. So if I go down here and let's open the LiDAR technology topic. In order to be able to mark the course complete, I need to go down and find this button, the mark complete green button at the bottom of the page. And when I check that, the system knows that I've completed that particular part of the training. And after it refreshes, we'll see at the top that my progress has changed. So now instead of being 5% through the course, I'm now 16% through the course. You are free to switch between languages as you wish, but you must mark the course complete in its entirety in one of the languages. So pick which language you're going to do the marking in, and that will give you access to the portal at the end of it. So once you've done that, you've got your course marked as complete. You can then go, I'm going to switch back to English now. You'll then have access to 2 new, or one of 2 new feature recorders at the top here. So this is our recorder. This is our interactive map. So the place where I know that you'll be keen to get to, and where hopefully you'll be spending quite a lot of your time over the course of the next few months if you join us on this volunteer project. So a little bit of a tour of the portal itself. So you can see here we've got a series of layers in a map, or here on the right hand side. I just switch these off so that we'll have a look at how the portal presents just as you first open it. Here we are. So you can see we've got the LiDAR data, we've got a project boundary, and I've left in some of the sample features that our beta testers did, just so that you can see what they look like within the screen. In actual fact, these are going to be removed before you will start mapping, but I thought it would be helpful to see what features look like within the map for the purposes of tonight's little introduction. So over here on the map, we've got a series of features that we can switch on and off. So in the top here, these are the features that are drawn. So if I zoom in a little bit, and these are known as polygons, and they're active transcriptions that volunteers have made. So within here, you can see your features, which are in blue. You can see features that were drawn by everyone else, which will be first off in pink, and then when they are reviewed as part of the process of checking whether these data points are valid and are useful to the HER, they'll turn green. And then within here as well, we also have a series of those data layers that I mentioned, so our HER monuments. And for each of these monuments, you see that there's a lot of information already known. For each of these monuments, we're able to click through and see the record, the HENEB record. So we'll take this farmstead, for example. So I click on here, we can see that there are a series of features within here. So the rectory, farmstead, and here there is a URL linking back to Arfordir. If I click on that, it's going to open up that external record for us. So for every single one of these points within the feature recorder, you're able to easily link back to the full HER record as hosted by HENEB through the Difford Archaeological Trust, to be able to identify and see in more detail what each of these features are. And the same also applies with the scheduled monuments. So I'm going to zoom out and go and find ourselves a scheduled monument. So these are here in orange. We'll go and have a look at the fort. You can see these differ from the HER data in that they are a polygon extent. The HER data was a point data set. Again, if you click on this, you can see that it brings a little pop-up to tell you what's there. You can see a summary of the information. And again, by using the URL, you can go and see the full CADU report on that feature. And then finally within here, we have some additional features. Now, these are a part of projects that have happened, as I mentioned, only in some areas of the project area that we're looking at, some areas of the landscape. And you can see these are highlighted as blue lines within here. The same again, these also have feature data associated with them, so it should help you to identify them. And although this is a partial data set, it is useful because these data have been transcribed from other aerial sources, not using LiDAR, but using aerial photography. So these are a really good comparator to the sort of data that we are looking at within the LiDAR, and they will really help you to bring your sort of get your eye in, shall we say, to the sorts of features that you can see from the air. You'll notice that we don't have external URLs for these, and we don't have an online record for them, but very simply it will help you to see the topography of banks and ditches within the area. So we'll pop those off for a minute and have a quick look at the different LiDAR visualizations. So the default visualization is the local relief model. So this is that specialist visualization that I spoke about that really highlights the microtopography. So the sort of LiDAR data that you've probably seen before are the two other models. So this is a terrain hillshade. So can you see here that this highlights both the large scale changes in the landscape? So we've got the coast here coming in, the river valleys up into the mountains. This is the terrain, so it doesn't have any buildings or trees on. And this is the surface hillshade, which of course is now populated with all the wooded areas and the buildings within. And the difference here, if I pop the LiDAR local relief model back on, can you see how you can see the large scale changes, but the smaller changes, so we'll take a look at these field boundaries here, are much easier to identify, much clearer in the local relief model. Now, you'll have noticed that I've been switching these data layers on and off using the checkbox at the side here, but we can also create a little side-by-side window. So this little green icon, the keyhole tool, we can create a window which we can then move around the landscape so that we can see the terrain model and the local relief model side by side at the same time, which is really handy if you're trying to get your eye in, trying to understand what's going on within the landscape. We can resize that and we can zoom in and zoom out. And don't worry if I'm going through all of these things really quickly, there's very detailed training to come. This is just a taster of what the portal can do and how you can see the different layers within it. This is not intended to be a deep dive. So those are our LiDAR layers. And then we've also got a series of historic maps that can help us to provide that comparator data. So we have the second edition Ordnance Survey, which in this area dates from around 1900. And then we also have the first edition Ordnance Surveys. You'll notice there are two here. Most of our project area is on the Carmarthenshire Ordnance Survey first edition. A very small portion in the southeastern corner most of it is within the Pembrokeshire Ordnance Survey. A very small portion within the southeastern corner is on the Carmarthenshire first edition Ordnance Survey. But this dates from the middle of the of the 19th century. So you've got 1841 as your starting date for these. And then finally, we've got some modern layers. So we've got the Modern Ordnance Survey mapping, which hopefully will be quite familiar to you. Really useful resource telling you all sorts of important things about the terrain, of course, because you've got the contour lines that you can read off the mapping, but also about access, about trackways and routeways that are currently being used, the bridleways, the footpaths, the roads. And you've also, of course, got land use captured in the Ordnance Survey as well. So you've got your different types of woodland, your water courses, and of course your coastal features there too. And then we have the satellite data feed. So we've got our satellite photography here, which is of course a really useful comparator. And then finally you've got your modern mapping, which allows you to situate and orientate yourself within the map. So those are our layers, and I mean, you could spend a long time just having a play with those and getting familiar with them. And when you are, and when you think you've spotted something archaeological, you can then use the second part of the portal. Can you see here on the left-hand side we have the record form? So this is where, if we spot something within the LiDAR data, this is how we create our record. So what we do is we spend our time having a good look at the different layers, the different resources. We've got all our information from our training materials. We've looked at our information gazetteer, and we reckon that we've identified a feature. So here I can see this one here. I can see that that's a former field boundary running through there. I can check it out in the aerial photography, see what it looks like. I can see that it's not currently being used. I can have a look at the historic mapping. I can see that it's not a feature on the second edition or the first edition. And therefore, I'm going to make a really quick record of that because I think it might be something that is a potential archaeological feature. I can tell that it's a bank because it's raised and it's white. If it were a ditch like this trackway, it'd be darker in colour. So on the left-hand side, the record form allows me to pick the sort of feature that it might be. So this one here, it's a bank. And then I have some subtypes here, a former field boundary. If there is an existing HER record, I can add it in. So of course, I'm going to need to switch my HER records on to see that. And I can see that in this area, actually, no, there's nothing that is related to that bank. I've got a round barrow and a farmstead marked here, but nothing relating to this particular feature in that field. I'm going to make a very quick description for demonstration purposes. I'm going to zoom myself in. I think this probably relates to the medieval and post-medieval periods, but I know that it predates our historic mapping, or I think that it predates our historic mapping based on what I've been able to see. And I've been able to identify it in at least the local relief model, but let's go and see what it is in the others. So they're just about visible in the terrain hillshade. Same again in the surface data. It definitely wasn't there in the 3 maps, so I can just put that it is a LiDAR only feature here. And in the aerial photography, possibly. Let's say yes. Do we think we should go and visit it in the field? Do we think it's worthy of having a look at? I think for this particular feature, probably not, unless it's got an interesting relationship with other things. We'd probably pass on going and have a look at a field boundary. There's going to be lots of former field boundaries within the area. We really want to be highlighting for field visits those features where there is difficulty in understanding them, where there's something unusual, where there's a strange relationship between that feature and either mod features or other historic features. So that's really what the field visit is for. So we're happy with that. We now want to go and make a drawing. So we've made our attribute record on the left-hand side. We want to draw the feature out. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to capture a polygon that completely encloses that feature by selecting the tool, the polygon tool, clicking around the feature and then double clicking to close. So here we've got a very rough feature with its attribute data, and we're going to submit that to the record. There we go. And now we have, if I switch my features on, got a nice new record, which if I click on it, I can see all the information that I've just edited. So as you build your feature database, you and everybody else will be able to see the records that you've created as you start to sort of fill in the landscape and fill in the potential archaeological features across this area. So hopefully that's an interesting introduction for you. I know it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but don't worry, because there's plenty more information on the training, and as you become a volunteer on the project, you'll be able to access myself and Thomas for more information. And as just this slide as a reminder, you've got video resources and you've got printable resources to support you in using the portal, which we appreciate is a bit of a technical task, but we hope is a fun technical task. So what are the next steps? I've given you that's a swift introduction. Hopefully you're all still enthused and want to participate. So this is how we go forward. First of all, you'll need to register on the portal when you get the nod from me that the registration is live. Things to note about this is make sure you pick a suitable username, because your username will be visible to everybody. Don't use your email, and please don't use rude words or swear words or anything that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of a newspaper. Oh, and make sure that you read and agree to the terms and conditions. Complete the training course. As I mentioned, it's fully bilingual. You can do it in either English or Welsh, but please make sure that you sign off in one language or the other language in order to gain access to the portal. And then you're ready to start mapping. So you get to explore the landscape and this data and help us to identify some potential archaeological features. And of course, we're really keen that this becomes a community, an online community around the data. So look out for email notifications of our Zoom catch-ups where you can get together in a room like this. And I promise it won't be me talking as much for every session, but you'll hear a little bit from me and from everybody else and talk together about the different sort of things that you've seen, any questions or queries that you've got, and anything that you'd like to raise with the team or get extra advice or information about will be part of that session. So I'm aware that I have talked a lot and I've gone through a lot of things, so I'm going to stop right there. You're all probably very relieved about that, and ask if you have any questions. I don't think anything came in the chat while we're going. So the floor is yours, ladies and gentlemen.
Rebecca, John Brownbrick.
Hello, John.
Is it possible to extract 3D models from the information? I'm currently doing some 3D drawings of Nevern Castle, but struggling a little bit with the profile. I can see it on the LiDAR maps as a plan, but I can't extract the elevations of it. A little bit of a struggle. So is it possible with the facilities here, you can extract details like that? Height maps?
So yes, it is possible, but it's not possible through the portal. So in order to provide the data in a way that is just easy and quick and slick, the LiDAR you're seeing in the portal is an image, not the 3D model. So what you can't do from that data is draw a profile across it or take a 3D model. Now, because of course that fits the purpose of being able to transcribe the features by and large. However, of course, Pembrokeshire own the LiDAR data, they own the models, they have that available. So by having a chat with Thomas and myself and with Philip, I'm sure they can provide you with the data that you require to be able to draw that out. That data is available, it's just not part of the portal because it's a little bit too much, it's a little bit too difficult really to use that data for the task of mapping features.
I'll probably be in touch with you then. The survey hasn't overlapped into Carmarthenshire yet, has it? I mean, I live in Whitland and I've done a lot of 3D drawings of the Abbey.
Would it be if I pop the map back on? So let's go and have a look. So this is the coverage area. If I just pop this off. There we go. So I know it's a light blue color. That's because it stands out much better when they've got the LiDAR data underneath it. So this is the coverage area. I'll put the modern mapping on underneath as well. So there. So in terms of the historic mapping, there is a corner of historic Carmarthenshire. I can't tell you whether that is current Carmarthenshire because I do know that the boundaries change. Phil, do you want to jump in on that one?
So say,
John.
Oh, sorry, John. You can get hold of the 1 meter or Wales for data map Wales. If you need any help, I'm quite happy to give you a little tutorial on how to bring that into. Have you used QGIS before?
Basically, I use AutoCAD, but
Okay. Wait, I can give you some instructions on how to get hold of that data. Just give me a shout. But so it's not as high resolution as ours, of course, but that data is available for the whole of Wales. So
great.
to the high watermark
Fine.
of
Look
data about
forward
Wales.
to it later on. Thanks very much.
No
Enjoyed it tonight.
Great
And
question. Well done. Thank you, John. Tim, have you got your hand up? Would you want to jump in?
I have my hand up. I'm just wondering, how is LiDAR any help for picking out ploughed out features?
So it depends to what level it's been ploughed out. So what I would say is, because of the sensitivity of the model that is created, many features that can't really be seen on the aerial photographs, and particularly can't be seen on walkover survey, do have a trace within the LiDAR data. So it is our best tool for identifying really subtle remains, including those that have been extensively plough damaged. If a feature has genuinely been completely plough leveled, of course, there's no physical trace, and therefore the LiDAR won't identify it. So if you're looking at a feature that is truly only accessible as a crop mark, so essentially where all of effectively the topsoil has been removed, all of the upstanding features have removed, no, the LiDAR will not identify that.
Okay, so I'm thinking of an X round barrow that was leveled. You can see differences in the soil, but LiDAR doesn't do the same job that ground penetrating radar would do.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
It is a surface only technique, and that's why it's really complementary to these other resources.
Yeah.
However, as I would say, sort of circling back to my original point, there are many features that by all other methods appear to be completely leveled, but we can still identify small traces of upstanding feature within the LiDAR. So it's worth looking through examples that you already know, but also in different areas to identify sort of microtopography.
Yeah. Okay, good. And one other thing, I was a bit late signing in, and you were mentioning an NRW project.
Yeah, so that's the Natural Resources Wales, sorry.
Yeah.
They commissioned whole Wales coverage of 1 meter resolution, which has now been delivered. It was the data set that Phil just referred to. That's available for download. It isn't available in the different visualizations that we've created here, specifically the local relief model, which is very good for archaeology, but it is available and you can create visualizations for it for other areas. Obviously, we focused this project on the high resolution data that's been captured as part of this. There are probably, I suspect, aspirations that once we've completed this project area to then bring in the 1 meter resolution data as a comparator. It won't necessarily be particularly useful for the area that we've already got the 25 centimeter data for, but for all the surrounding areas, of course, it's better than nothing. So I suspect that's certainly the route that we've gone down with the other LiDAR portals. Once we've completed the coverage in the high resolution, we've then brought in the 1 meter standard coverage to continue mapping outside the area.
Okay, thank you. So that one is all Wales? Is the entire topography?
Yeah, as Phil said,
Oh,
down to the mean high water mark. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Rebecca, if I just wanted to come back on the first question we had from John. We will provide the data, but we need to know what that use of that data is going to be for before we will provide it, because we obviously need to safeguard against potential commercial use of the data. So if you contact us about Nevin Castle, if you just explain why you want the data, and then we will determine if it's within the remit for us to provide that.
There will be a license, as with all these things, there will be a licensing agreement that you'll sign up to. Effectively, the terms of use with the LiDAR portal are a licensing agreement. So, you're agreeing to fair use of the data that we're supplying. So yeah, absolutely, Thomas, that's something that you'll do with the national park.
Yeah, it's basically for the new information boards they need. But I'll be in touch anyway.
Okay. Jonathan's had his hand up for a while.
Yeah, no, I was trying
okay,
to
and we've got a question. Yeah, we've got a question in chat as well.
Brilliant. So Jonathan, I'll come to you first and then we'll go to the chat.
Okay, I've got 3 questions, but they're sort of all combined. Are you able to see where you've checked? Because obviously if you're zooming in, zooming out, it's quite difficult. Maybe you look the next day or look the following week, you think, oh, this looks familiar. Is there any way of tracking where you've been, or have you sort of got to keep track of that yourself?
I think really it's keeping track of it yourself, though. Of course, if you're recording features as you go, those will come up in your My Features layer. So that will provide you with information about where you were and where you've been. There isn't a sort of what we haven't done with this system is divide it up into, say, kilometre grid squares and allocate. That's not the plan for this portal, to allow people the flexibility to look wherever they wish to.
Okay. And where it's in green, you've got reviewed features. Does that mean they've been reviewed by an expert, by somebody, or?
It's a really good question, and something that I didn't tackle as part of the presentation. So what we like to do is, after people have, been volunteering for a little while, we ask anybody if they'd like to join the review team, and that review team works closely with professionals to go through the data and look at those features that might need a little bit more information added to them, those that might need a tweak of their geographical extent, for example. So it is a professional-led volunteer team, if that makes sense. So a smaller group of people who are really interested in kind of getting more involved in that technical job.
Okay, because I guess at the start there won't be anything on the map, and it's okay for you probably want multiple people to cover an area, because you get that second set of eyes or third set of eyes or fourth set of eyes, because they might see something people miss. But I guess over time, as and when those features get reviewed and confirmed, there's going to be less in that area to find. And I suppose not that it's going to be a waste of time, but I guess there'll become a point where there's no point like multiple people reviewing an area if it's been well searched and each of the features have actually been reviewed and confirmed, really. So I guess over time there'll be less interesting things to find, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you have to see this as a finite project. It's not, the LiDAR data is not going to keep everybody busy for decades to come. Depending on how many people get involved, depending on how enthusiastic the people are that get involved, there will be a limited number of features to record from the data. However, that being said, it's more than 300 square kilometers of data, so there is a lot to look at. And what I would say is that there is also quite a lot of interest in looking at beyond the historic environment, looking at other projects. So things like land use and environment type mapping within the national park. So there are other segue projects that could definitely contribute. What we found in other areas, and this might not be the case here in Pembrokeshire, every landscape is different. We found that there are specific feature types that warrant more detailed mapping or separate mapping. So an example of this is relict field boundaries. There tend to be a lot of them. They're very numerous in the landscape. They are really valuable as part of the archaeological record, but they can tend to clutter the map. So what we've done in other areas, if we set up a separate map essentially to do relic field boundaries, and then we've got a map for everything else. And it might be that as this project develops, there are particular types of features. Another example, in the Cranbourne Chase, there are a series of extremely regular pits, more than 2,000 of them across the area that the volunteers were looking at there. And it made a lot of sense to do really rapid point-based mapping of those pits to look at their distribution and to understand the geology that they sit over and what they might be used for, their form and function. So there's ways of developing the portal and following the interests and working with the things that people identify as part of this first wave of the project. So what it's finite, but there are ways and means of diving into other sorts of topics from this as a starting point.
Yeah, but I guess it's obviously if we see a feature that somebody else has mapped, it's not like, oh, I'm on somebody else's territory, I won't bother. I guess it's worth a second person interpreting it, because they might come up with a different interpretation, and obviously recording it as well.
It's definitely worth adding comments. So in the field record, you will have the opportunity to add a comment to that record. So once you've created it. So, but what we're not looking for is what would be a very pure citizen science approach, which would be that nobody could see anybody else's transcriptions, and therefore everybody would map everywhere, and then there'd be a job of trying to bring those transcriptions together. That has been tried in other projects, and while it was a lot of fun, type B fun, if any of you are familiar with that concept, as in it's fun after you've done it but not necessarily at the time, to bring together those records, what tends to happen is because you can't see what other people have been up to and you can't see the distribution of features that have been mapped across the landscape, honeypot sites tend to get hundreds of records. So very obvious things like the hill forts, for example, tend to get hundreds of records, and then most of the rest of the landscape tends to be overlooked. It doesn't allow people to see really, you know, so much what other people have been doing. So that's not an approach that we're going down for this route, for this one.
Okay, so if we see a feature that somebody else has mapped,
The opportunity to comment on it rather than
yeah,
to
so we can comment on it, but we wouldn't necessarily, you know, map it ourselves, because that would just be.
if it needed an adjustment, that would
Yeah.
happen at the review stage. It wouldn't happen at this first stage of the
Okay.
project.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Was that all three?
Yep, that was all thing.
Okay, great, cool. Right, I think we've got a few things in the chat. Let me just open that as an additional window. Who would have thought with the two massive screens that I would have run out of retail space, but here we are. Walkover surveys, that's one for you, Thomas. Will there be opportunities to get involved in walkover surveys in the future?
Yeah, it's the sort of next phase, I suppose, we're going to be looking at. But Mike has raised a good point, actually, and it comes back to sort of the countryside code, which is the last question around, should we go and have a look if it's on publicly accessible land? You could do, and probably worth highlighting, there is an option to upload photographs. So yes, Mike, if it's on publicly accessible land, you can. But what we would stress is if it's not, and if you're not sure as well, then the answer would be we wouldn't want you to be doing that at this stage.
Yeah, we certainly don't control solo trips up the mountain to try and find a feature that may be extremely difficult to identify on the ground that looks very, very clear. Those of you who came with us when we did the training days will have an appreciation of just how differently things can present. Not just because the LiDAR gives you a very different perspective, a very different model to look at, but also because when you're out in the landscape, you're dealing with the current environment, the current vegetation conditions, the current ground conditions as well. So we're not encouraging people to go out solo. If you happen to be on a footpath walking past, then by all means cast your eyes over and see what you can see. But it's not a part of this project to go and do walkover at this stage. Any more for any more?
It looks like Paul had a question, but he's not put it. He's just said he has a question, but hasn't put it in the chat.
Where are you, Paul? Do you want to jump in now? Are you? I think you're still muted, Paul. If you wanted to unmute yourself. All right, we'll jump to David's question and then we'll circle back. So David's got the question, will the project be able to feed back corrected information to the HER? Yeah, the really important thing here is putting that existing HER reference number in. So this project is not limited to identifying new sites. It's also enabling us to do enhancements to existing HER records. Now that could be corrections of the data, but in a lot of cases, it's going to be providing geospatial extents, so polygon extents for known features, significantly enhancing the point data in the record. Thomas, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So that's another opportunity with this data, is you could actually, because you can see where the spots are or the polygons are. So in relation to schedule monuments as well, that CADU have designated, if you notice the polygon is off, although in the legislation the polygon doesn't technically need to be, they still have a little bit of flexibility, but it would be really useful if some of you are quite interested to go through that and see actually, is it in the right place? Does it need refining? And then obviously CADU and of course HENEB can have a look at that. But obviously this the HENEB is helping us with the kind of HER bit. So probably as part of the review stage, we will probably look at some of them. But you can see there, Rebecca's highlighting some examples. So yeah, it'd be really useful to kind of refine that.
And so this is actually a really good example of a case where you would want to look at you want to look at the schedule monument feature and the description of the feature, because as Thomas said, that often the boundary doesn't entirely relate to the full feature description, but from the LiDAR data, it's really clear that there are key elements relating to this feature. So, for example, the access way, you can see that there is a specific route way up into this enclosure. You can also see that there is another associated rectilinear enclosure that isn't related. So there's lots of additional features. You can also tell that there is this historic ploughing here too, which, although it's not contemporary to the fort feature, has an implication for how that feature is viewed and how it's understood, and the subsequent land use, and therefore potentially the preservation or the degradation of that feature. And so there's all these different elements that you can read from the LiDAR data and add to that, as well as just thinking about, is the boundary in the right place? Is there a sufficient amount of information against that record? Now we have the LiDAR data and the information from the LiDAR data to add to that. So it's adding a layer of evidence against the records we already have. Jump in, Thomas.
Yeah, I was just going to make this is actually a really good example, because potentially going back to what you mentioned before about commenting on, is it worth going to visit this? Well, there's so much things going on here. Assuming it's accessible, this is a sort of example where you might want to recommend visiting.
Yeah, so this one is, it's not accessible via public footpath, so that's not something we have. I don't know, we have a permissive path,
Yes,
don't we?
these, Rebecca, are actually owned, those two sites are national park. They're on national park estate, so those
Amazing.
would be
So I know
accessible.
exactly who to ask to get permission.
Yeah.
But there we go. Yeah. If you know who the landowner is, we can talk. But I think bring these back to the project. Keep it as part of the kind of community. Involve other people. So that these aspects of it are all really interesting. And help to kind of bring everybody together. But do you want to jump in?
I'll just add really that I suppose there'll probably quite a few like this, but one of the reasons will be is that this is much more accurate data. And a lot of these features were digitized. They were probably digitized to some old aerial photography, which probably wasn't. We didn't have all of the really good ground control point sites we've got that OS have got these days. The what's it called? The word has slipped from the back of my head. But they got ground control stations everywhere now, so things are much more accurate than they used to be. So apart from perhaps missing some of the features, some will be off because they were dealing with much less accurate data. Sorry, go on.
I was just saying, particularly on a site like this, so you can see here from reading the contour lines just how steep this site is. So the more dramatic the large scale changes in topography and the fewer static features like field boundaries and such, the harder it is to get really accurately referenced air photos. So you will see a lot of the features that are transcribed from aerial photography will need to be relocated effectively based on the evidence within the LiDAR data. Yeah, Rhinex is the word. Yeah, there is a Rhinex system. Any more? Anybody? Any other questions, queries, thoughts from anyone else? Emma, do you want to jump in?
Just a quick question. After we've all enthusiastically put loads of notes on the map, how often were you thinking of revisiting it and reviewing what we've done?
So in terms of the review process, so it is quite linear. So features are mapped, features are reviewed, and then those are passed on to the HER, and then ideally the HER record gets updated, kind of fully in and of its own. We of course don't have so much control over that process. That's for the HER officer to do. The interesting thing, and one of the things that we emphasize through the training, is that interpretation is a continuous process. So when we look to the project has to have a linearity to it, otherwise everybody would go insane. So there have to be sort of steps that we follow through. But as we follow through those steps and more or less completed the mapping for the area, it's then time to look at sites, and it will probably come down to looking at particular sites within the landscape that are of interest, and then diving more deeply into the interpretation of those sites. And that's the point at which you're engaging with the more traditional processes of how a site gets reported and updated on the HER. Which, you know, tends to be on very much a site by site basis, not on this sort of whole landscape basis, or this whole landscape approach that we're taking here. So essentially this project in a linear fashion, map it, review it, report it to the HER, and then individual sites or landscapes or parts of the project that then you want to take a deep dive into, that's the point at which you start working within the more traditional HER processes. Does that make sense? Super. Anyone else? Anyone we haven't heard from that wants to jump in? No? How are you feeling? Are you all as enthused as you were when you first signed up? Or have I put you all off? Well, nobody's left the meeting, so super, well done. Paul, I noticed that do we want to circle back to you for your question now? Are you ready? So I haven't got any audio from you, Paul. Of course, I'm really aware that I've rattled through a lot of things tonight, and you might want to go away and think about it. So next steps, I'll be sending out an email to everybody. Once I've collected this recording, it will be put on the website, so it will be available for you and anybody who couldn't make the meeting tonight to listen along to. And you'll all get a notification of when the registration is open, so you can join in. That should be by the end of this week at the latest. And of course, you're all welcome to email me and ask any questions that you think of. You know, I'm sure some of you will wake up at 3 a.m. thinking, oh, I wish I'd asked Rebecca that. Feel free, you know where I am. You've got my contact details. You can drop me a line anytime to ask about it. Thomas.
I was just going to say, just thank you for everyone for attending. Hopefully it's become a bit clearer. This data will help us to improve the way we're managing the landscape, which I explained at the start. But if you know of any other people who couldn't be here tonight, feel free to tell them to get in touch with me, and then we can send them the links and stuff. Because obviously tonight is a bit of a launch to give information about this, but obviously there's no, like Rebecca mentioned, there's flexibility, so people can always sign up as and when they hear about this really now.
So, yeah. Sorry, I was distracted by Paul, whose laptop is in meltdown. Are you able to type your question in the chat, or do you want to drop me an email, Paul, instead? And we'll pick up some other time. Yeah, it's really important to note that once registration is open, it's open to everybody. So other people can get involved. And as I say, this webinar will be posted on the sort of introductory page to the portal, so anybody can come through and have a look. No problem, Paul. Drop me an email, you know where I am. Okay, so if everybody has said,
sorry, Rebecca, one last question. Sorry. Obviously, this is the northern bit of the national park. Are you doing the rest of Pembrokeshire or just the other bits of the national park? What's the plan longer term?
Shall I answer that, Rebecca? Pointing towards me virtually. So we would love to do more. So obviously it's an aspiration long term, but at this stage, we're just focusing on this. And obviously this is new for us. So, you know, potentially we can develop this further, but obviously it requires funding to do that. So at this stage, we're going to stick with this area, but we would love to expand it out if we can.
I think it's important to note.
So I'll have to wait to see some pictures of my garden in Hook then.
Sorry. You can look at the National Resources Wales data.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to note that actually you guys are kind of the national trailblazers for this approach within Wales as well. So what has definitely happened in England, where we've run quite a few of these projects now, is that the success of the projects that we've run has led to being able to draw in some more money, either to expand those projects. So the Cranbourne Chase project, we were able to expand from the original 2 years now onto another 2 years, including expansion to the whole of the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape using the Environment Agency data. So, you know, the success of the project has allowed us to draw in more money from that, and looking at other areas and how successful they've been has allowed people to kind of, you know, project teams to draw that comparison and say, hey, look, it'd be really great if not only could we collect the LiDAR data, but we'd have a way of using that with our local communities that is easy and accessible. Bill, do you want to jump in?
So really just to kind of mention, I don't want to get everyone's hopes up too much, about the national LiDAR data set. Now I know the person at LW who kind of dealt with that project, and LW are very interested to know how people are using the 1 meter, because they want to be able to justify doing more collection in the future and at high resolution. So if you find yourself using that data for anything, what it happens to be, let them know what you're using it for. Because if there's justification out there for doing it again, then they'll try and do a whole set. Perhaps we'll get the whole of Wales at 25 centimeter. Who knows?
I think that's an absolute pipe dream, but dive into this project, bring it all the enthusiasm that I know you're going to bring to it, work your little socks off, and it does pay dividends. The way that people who have the purse strings respond to this kind of engagement has been universally positive in all the other ones I've done. So if you want that expansion, then, you know, wholeheartedly jump into this one and let's make it happen. Okay, has everybody said what they wanted to say? Anybody else got anything else they'd like to contribute? Thank you so very much, everybody, for coming along tonight. We really, really appreciate your time. And I and Thomas and the rest of the team are really keen to get started on this with you. It's been a long time coming, as Thomas explained. So like, we're super excited to be able to like launch it and finally make it go. So thanks a lot. We really appreciate your time, and I'll be speaking with you soon, I'm sure. Take care, everyone. Bye now.